Some dive into the sand, thinking it's water, and they swim in it until they pass out. They choke to death, their throats filled with rocks and dirt. Onlookers can only assume they think they're drinking water. This quote from The Devil's Highway graphically depicts the fate of the migrants who are trekking across the U.S.-Mexican border without access to basic resources necessary for human survival, such as water and protection from the sun. The provision of these resources is the mission of humanitarian aid groups like No More Deaths, who protect and save human life regardless of that person's homeland. While those aid workers strive to protect the lives of the Mexican immigrants, the United States government has made it its mission to not only deter migration, but also attack those who help humans survive in the desert. Understanding the government's abuse of infrastructural power in regards to enforcement and border policy, and the implications of what's considered moral and what's actually legal for humanitarian aid workers, is key to grappling with the deathly conflict at the U.S.-Mexican border.
Under recent government administrations, there has been a supreme crackdown on immigration to the United States. Border Patrol, along with other enforcement agencies, have expanded exponentially, and the death toll for migrants in the desert has continued to rise. For years, humanitarian aid groups like No More Deaths, Humane Borders, and Samaritans have actively fought against the harsh conditions of the desert and the government policies that have forced migrants into these deathly regions, with the hope of meeting one of the most basic human physiological needs, our need for water. These volunteers have strategically placed jugs of pure water in the most remote and sparse areas of the migrants' journey across the border in hopes of saving human lives. However, these brave humanitarians have faced massive pushback from the government. There have been several arrests of No More Deaths volunteers throughout the years for breaking the law in an attempt to aid suffering migrants crossing the border. But the most recent arrest, made in January of 2018, in the midst of increasingly strict immigration policy, made numerous front-page headlines.
The abuse of infrastructural power manifests in the prosecution of humanitarian aid workers through the way the law is manipulated by government enforcement agencies. Humanitarian aid relief is being criminalized and prosecuted through misdemeanor charges such as leaving water and food for migrants without a permit and wildlife refugees, as well as prosecution through the aiding and abetting of illegal immigration. Although the goal of humanitarian aid relief agencies is not to facilitate illegal immigration, but to help prevent the loss of human life, it has become clear through the strict enforcement that the goal of the government is to adamantly stand against any support to migrants, disregarding their human life. The way in which the law is manipulated by multiple facets of government, including enforcement agencies and the judiciary system, demonstrates a multilateral abuse of infrastructural power in order to repress those who stand against the regime, thereby targeting humanitarian aid relief with despotic power to silence their voices.
In pursuit of understanding the justice in persecuting humanitarian aid relief by the government, it's vital to discuss the implications of the situation through the lens of morality versus legality, and how both the humanitarian aid agents and the government use each respectively to defend their actions. As discussed in the previous section, government agencies abuse infrastructural power through misdemeanor and anti-immigration policy in order to defend their persecution of humanitarian aid relief. Though using legal means, this abuse of infrastructural power to repress the humanitarian aid agencies as a form of despotic power serves as a demonstration that legality does not equate to morality, evident through the blatant disregard of human life based on the legal status of migrants. On the other hand, the actions of humanitarian aid relief agencies are infractions against the legal system. However, the law is being broken in an attempt to save human lives, demonstrating that the legal system is not always moral. By understanding the methods and means in which humanitarian aid relief groups are persecuted, we are able to see the goal of the government and what they hope to accomplish through their targeted attack. Our government, built on fear and segregation, will go to great lengths to oppose those who stand against the regime, and thereby othering both the illegal immigrants and those who value their lives. The ideas discussed in the video both serve to demonstrate the prosecution faced by humanitarian aid groups, as well as warn the public of the direction the regime is taking. No More Deaths agrees with this warning, exhibited through the quote on their Instagram page from the Auschwitz Memorial. When we look at Auschwitz, we see the end of a process. It is important to remember that the Holocaust actually did not start from gas chambers. This hatred gradually developed from words, stereotypes, and prejudice through legal exclusion, dehumanization, and escalating violence. The quote serves as a premonition of our current path filled with hatred and prejudice. The act of prosecuting and othering populations in an attempt to repress their beliefs and ideas is the first step leading toward a divided nation, disregarding democracy and morality in favor of maintaining power.
The suppression of humanitarian aid by government enforcement agencies is a dangerous and unjust abuse of power, and it is our role as the American people to stand for what is moral, regardless of legality. In the face of injustice and the abuse of power, the voice of the people becomes one of the most important tools in protecting the value of life for those unable to defend themselves. The dangerous road our government walks can only be avoided through the actions of the public. For if we do not stand against these atrocities now, history is doomed to repeat itself.